awesome day. So session 4, we are moving on now. So we've talked about goals, we've talked about the location, we've talked about what men talk about. You've maybe got all of that lined up for your event, but how do you promote it? How do you make sure it's delivered well? And how do you make sure it's actually making a difference and having an impact? Well, we've got 2 more great speakers here. I'm going to share something about their project with a particular focus now on promoting, delivering and measuring the impact of events. So we'll have Catherine Newton from Are You OK? But before that, first, and picking up on the alcohol conversation we had just a few minutes ago, perhaps, we've got Lachlan Stevens from his boy Elroy, a bar which is behind the Barstool Brothers group in Wollongong. Lachlan, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Glenn, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we do at his boy Elroy and Barstool Brothers. So, as Glenn said, I am the owner of his boy Elroy. It's a burger, sports and beer bar down in Wollongong. And I previously served as a combat engineer and went over on deployment on 2 occasions to Afghanistan. So I'm acutely aware of the impacts of mental health, not only on myself personally, but on those around me that I served with. After leaving Afghanistan, after leaving the army, I joined a company called Merlin Entertainments. For those of you who don't know, they run aquariums and other visitor attractions like Sea Life Sydney Aquarium. And then I got out of that and acquired his boy Elroy. And I was immediately kind of struck by the people's men's ability to kind of sit across the other side of the bar from myself and my venue manager and now general manager of Barstool Brothers, Daniel Chin, and open up and talk about their stories to us. And it wasn't that we were intentionally trying to elicit those stories from them, but it did raise a good point about how our business as a venue that serves alcohol, that has those at times toxic kind of connotations to being in a bar with a bunch of blokes and all that locker room talk. How do we build the framework, the cultural framework within our organisation to support and elicit conversations with men, being our key demographic? And how do we do that in a safe way and a productive way? And how do we use alcohol as a conduit to conversation for men to open up and talk about their problems in a real relaxed, non-confrontational way? And that's where Barstool Brothers was born. It was a monthly catch up where we just invite everyone down and we pay for a burger, beer, and we just have a chat. There's no kind of agendas whatsoever. It's just a space for men to come and almost network with each other, all under this umbrella of mental health conversation. Fast forward 3 years and we've got 1,100 members. We're a registered charity and we've run 215 events, some involving alcohol and some not involving alcohol, but under the premise that we have to have sustainable lifestyles. You can mung down on a burger, you can have a beer, but also be fit and active, whether it's walking or cycling or golf. These are the types of events that we run, and we try and make them as accessible for people as possible. And that kind of flows into our business strategy around community. We raise funds through our customers, through our online tipping capabilities on it, and ordering capabilities, and we raise around $600 a week and that's done through our community, supporting our community. And those that money then goes towards running and facilitating these events for men to come and build relationships with each other. So I guess the key kind of strategy is to make it as less confrontational, with no agendas, really authentic monthly event where we're giving away food. And that's us casting out the net into the water to catch a fish. We don't want people to kind of think they're coming to a mental health support group. We want people to think that they're coming and they're just coming to meet other men and have a chat and have a burger and watch it, even if they're here for a free burger. I don't care. Once we catch them in that net, we funnel them into smaller events. This is where the conversation can get a little bit deeper and more significant with each other. They've met someone, they're starting to feel comfortable with that person. They might go and play golf, and suddenly they've got 18 holes to talk about their feelings. And that's where you see the conversations get a little bit more deeper and meaningful. From there, we can then steer them off into services like the Fathering Project, for example, or Are You Okay? Headspace. We aren't, we're not kind of putting our hands up and saying we're going to facilitate that help for people. We're more so just funneling people to those services. In terms of marketing, we have just gone live with a public Facebook group. All of this has been marketed through word of mouth. And it's a great example of how we've used our business and looked at our business from a sustainability perspective. And some people think sustainability is environmental sustainability. Sure, that is true. That's one pillar of sustainability. There's another two pillars of sustainability. It's economic sustainability and social sustainability. We ask ourselves as a licensed venue, how do we develop a framework where we can give back to our community? And then how do we communicate that to our mass audience who are there for pretty pictures of burgers and some fun, engaging, lighthearted content targeted at our main demographic of younger men? When you counterbalance that with some meaningful information, you elicit a really good response. And we've been able to kind of steer a lot of our His Boy Elroy customers, which is quite a busy bar in Wollongong, into our men's mental health initiative, and the rest is history. And we've seemed to be quite successful at that organic marketing strategy, that strategy where our members actually become advocates for us. We just make sure, and I think this is a key point, is we just make sure we've got someone there to document these events so we can shout out about it and compound this community. We also have other kind of small tactics that we use at an event. For example, we have a pay it forward option. So for example, if you don't want to claim a free burger and beer, you can pay it forward. So you pay double. We give you a card, a pay it forward card, and then that person can go off and give that to someone else. Therefore, it compounds our community of men who are coming through our doors, but also through doors of other venues. We don't hold all our events at His Boy Elroy. We hold one out of probably about 8 events per month at His Boy, and we hold them at other venues, and we get those other venues to market Barstool Brothers for us. And it's all about leveraging off other people's networks, whether it be their business networks or whether it be their the Gotcha for Life network, or Are You OK network, or Black Dog network, and ensure that that funnel where we're funneling people to them is two-way, and they're funneling people to us, because it's not all about the clinical or social support. It's sometimes just about connecting with others, and that's our role in this bigger picture of the mental health space.
Great, thanks, Lucky. Can we jump in there and come back to you with any questions?
Oh, of course.
Fantastic. So we've talked a lot today about, when you talk about promotion, sometimes you think about just go straight to sort of, posters and stuff like that. But actually, the content of the event helps promote it. So, and we've seen here today just how food is such an important part of getting blokes together. We've had a couple of examples of brekkie events. We've had a couple of examples of pizza-based events, and of course, Lachlan's got a bit of a head start because he can legitimately offer free beer to men. Not everyone can do that, but the beer and burger piece and the location part we talked about in session 2. The very act of locating an event in a place where men gather is a way of promoting it before you even create a poster or any kind of advertising. So and also having a very clear goal about what you're trying to achieve, which is session 1, and clearly what you're trying to achieve there is build a community of men where there's social connection and improving mental health. So it's great to see what you're up to, and we'll come back to you with some questions shortly. So our final speaker today is from an organisation that needs no introduction. Are You OK? One of the best known mental health organisations in Australia, pretty much known in every single household, and has a fantastic track record of delivering conversations around mental health in community and workplace and many different settings. So we thought it'd be great to, whilst they don't focus specifically on men, there's clearly a huge amount to learn from Are You OK in terms of how to deliver successful events. So we thought it'd be a great honour and opportunity to have Catherine Newton, who's the CEO of Are You OK, come and round off the day with some guidance on how do you promote, deliver and review your events. Catherine, thanks for joining us.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for that intro. That's really kind of you. Really, thanks for thinking of us. That's awesome that you thought of us. And I know, Glenn, that we're often trying to work on the ways that we can collaborate, which is exactly what Lockie's just touched on in terms of it's the pathways to support. But as you've said, Glenn, it's absolutely Are You OK's role to start conversations, to start the chats as everything. I'm really hoping that the points that I'm going to bring up today are going to help summarize what you've been talking about. I have got some slides because I thought that I've got some pictures that can point to some things that I thought might be helpful. So yes, Are You OK is well known. And why can you see my screen there?
Yep, crystal clear.
Just looking for a nod or a thumbs up from a couple of people. Yep, gotcha. Thank you. I'll just put that on bigger. So it absolutely is well known, and I truly believe that the reason why it is well known is because of this guy, Gavin Larkin. He's our late founder. Gavin started Are You OK because he lost his father to suicide. And sadly, Gavin passed away from cancer 2 years after he started Are You OK? But I think the real beauty of Are You OK is why it's been successful and why it is so well known is that Gavin was an advertiser. He was a marketer. He is an advertising background. He was not a clinician. He didn't have any clinical background. And what Are You OK does is really provide a free, practical, early entry point into this space. And none of our communications mentions suicide, depression, or other mental illness, because we know that it's not always about mental illness. It's not always about suicide. It's literally about life's ups and downs. And, you're talking about food, and Gav's thing was about having a cuppa. It was in the time it takes to have a cuppa, you can have a conversation that can change your life. Gav sadly passed away from cancer. So he hasn't been able to see this incredible legacy that he's left behind. And what we've been able to achieve and what we'll continue to do is build that culture change. So about shifting attitudes and behaviours. We had to start somewhere. We had to start with that question. And so, of course, 12 years ago, if you think back, it was a very different landscape. It was a very different narrative. And so it was all about the question. Now, you don't have to say, are you okay? How are you traveling? How are you going? What's going on for you? Got a lot on your plate. It's not that we're scripting that you have to say those words. It's actually about starting a conversation in your way, making it as easy and as comfortable as you need as to what's best for your mate, your neighbour, your family, your colleague. And so it's about changing the culture. And Are You Okay? Has the real privilege of being funded by corporate sponsors and by community. So we get very, very little, get a really tiny grant from Department of Health as part of the National Suicide Prevention, Media and Communications Leadership Programme. So it's very much kind of funded by the people. And the difference about Are You Okay? Is that we're a health promotion, so we're not a support service. And the difference for us is that we're talking to the people around the person that needs help. So we're not actually talking to the guy who's struggling, we're talking to those around them. That's where our point of difference comes in. And we've really always been based on the premise that if you notice a change, you are the best placed person to spot that change, changes in mood, behaviours, routines. And so we're asking people that when you notice the change, no matter how small it is, that we're trying to stop small things becoming big things, to trust your gut. And so just as Lachlan has said, and like many of you have said before, this is where the role of that informal support comes in. So we are not a support service, as I've said. So what we do is help provide those pathways. So our number one goal is to start the conversation. Number two is that if that conversation gets too big for you and I, then that's where we need to refer people into the doctor, the headspace, all the services that you would have known and spoken about today. And of course, then we sit above the self-care piece. So it's obviously important. I'm sure many of us on this call understand the notion of we can't lend and offer support to someone if we're not okay ourselves. So we're helping people understand when to be ready to have a conversation. Have you checked in with yourself? Are you good to go? And then how and where can you have this conversation? And then, pleasingly, what's been happening, particularly in the recent years, particularly with that kickstart, into getting people, not the kickstart, but more into the, I don't know, how can you say, like giving the oomph to keeping the conversation going. So people are not okay. They haven't been okay in the pandemic. They haven't been okay before that. But now there's that penny drop moment. People are really seeing that they have to have this conversation. And so it's about keeping the conversation going. What do I do when someone's not okay? So how we tackle when we go out, generally we'll, as Glenn said, we don't do specific male-based events, but our conversation convoys are where we hop in cars. We're a really small team at Are You Okay? So we really are really grateful for our ambassador program. So that's 100 people who are trained to safely share the message. And I know we were talking about that safe language and the guidelines. It's real people talking and sharing their story in a real way. And so we go where they are. So I would say my recommendations are, in terms of promotion, is to always keep your audience in mind, meet them where they're at, which I know is what you would have spoken about today. Local media love the story. They love the storytelling. They often want to be involved in this mental health and suicide prevention space. And so they're certainly a first go-to for us. On the physical side of things, I know you've spoken about posters, getting those up, and that's where Lachlan mentioned about channeling into other people's networks. Is it an organisation? Is it a venue? Where can you be physically eye-catching? In the digital space, how's your website? On the social media front, how are you going? Are you targeting? Use your Google Analytics on your websites to see where your people are coming in from. Use your social media to target. And you can apply for grants for Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. Really think about your audience and what your best channel is. You can apply for grants in terms of they can help you with that ad spend on the social media front. Who are your funders? Who's sponsoring you? So what channels do they have? Get out through them, which again is what Lachlan said. And then the incentives. So you've spoken about food. What are they going to take away? What are they going to get out of that? Make that really clear in your promotion. So you're letting them know what they're going to get. local knows best. We all know this. So think about your local organisations, your local heroes. Who are they who can really champion your message? Who's going to be your legends? Who's going to be your voice to be able to say, this is important, this is going to be awesome, come on down and join us. And I think really keep in mind as well the role of family and friends. And so what's going to really be attractive to them? So it might be that you turn up at a farm festival. It might be that you turn up at a family field day. It might be the barbecue. So whilst your audience is going to be the men at those events, how can you also bring the friends and the family of those men, as we're saying that's what we do at Are You OK, into your space, into your environment? What have you got there that's going to appeal? Because we know what we often see in our experience is that men are on the periphery. They're the ones looking at the cars, kicking the tires. They're the ones who are circling. And it's often the friends and family of people who are not struggling that we'll start the conversation with. They'll start the conversation and then they'll bring them in. It might also be parents of people. We've had a lot of parents coming up to us to let them know that they're worried about their young ones or their adult ones. So think about them and what you can do to bring them in, and then you can speak to them as a pathway for the support. What's the takeaway? As I've said before, what's the one thing you want people to take away from your event? If you can really solidify that, you can then move into the delivery phase, which I really believe, and what we always try to do at Are You OK is keep it simple. Simple goes a long way. We can all get excited. We can all think that we can do the biggest and brightest thing, but actually it might not be what's needed. Think about the one thing that you want to achieve from this event and stick to it. Be realistic. What's your environment? What's the demographic? What's the mood going to be like? Realistically, what are you going to be able to achieve at this event? And it's about then having your best crew around you that can produce that. So for example, I have a lot of crew when we're out on the convoy who are men, because it's actually the men that will engage with others. We have a cuppa corner. So this is where you can see that photo in the middle here. That's where we can start the chats. That's where we have a couple of tables. We have a cuppa. I always have a couple of guys on the cuppa stand. And when I say I always have, I go on these, but I'm just saying that I find it a lot more beneficial to have guys on the stand. I have male drivers because sometimes the conversations can get quite intense. We're at the fuel stations. And I think that's because men see the quick exit. It's about when we're refueling, they see Are You OK? They see the yellow, they recognize us, and they use that moment to approach and say, I've been struggling, I've got this, what do you reckon? Or very often it's to vent. And so who are your best crew that's going to help you deliver that key achievement? Be ready for the crisis intervention side of things. As I've just mentioned, and as Lachlan alluded to there, this is when things start to, it can either build to get serious. You need to be ready. You need to know who's available, where your local support services are, or where the local hospital is. But it's really about, I really encourage you to get that plan so that everyone in your team knows what to do when you've got a crisis intervention moment. And that also for us in the team, we know what the plan is. And so when we see someone who's having a crisis intervention conversation, that we've got to look, they clock. And so if I'm in that conversation, for example, I know that the crew around me are now talking to the local service, or they're finding out where the hospital is, or we're trying to find a friend and family of that person who's there. So really it's for the audience to have the good crew around, but also it's for yourselves. And I think it's all about agreeing. I've got, a number of times where as a team, we thought we were going down one road, we thought we were going to achieve something, and everyone had very different pictures of how this was going to work and what we were going to achieve. So really get that agreement first up. Think about your challenges. What are your barriers? Is it that people don't have easy access to your event? Is it that you're not likely to get a lot of thoroughfare? Is it that the wet weather's going to impede you? Is it that the music's going to be too loud? So really think about logistically what your challenges are, and then also what the barriers are going to be to having that chat. Is it approachable? Does it look too much like a therapy session? Always got to think of your sponsors. Who do you need to thank? How can you acknowledge them? and have some engagement pieces in your area. For example, it might be for example, on the golf day, have a scoreboard where people can personalize it and they can have a bit of fun, have a bit of activities. And again, that's where the friends and the family come in. So what can you be doing to have a bit of fun, to have a chat, to really ease into that conversation? And then on the review side of things, each of these moments for me that you can see are something that really where it was, what we would call, a good outcome. Whether it was people who were struggling, people who were looking for help, people who were looking to vent. And this is, an example of many here. So I think it's really important to pause, to take the time to reflect and to review what you've done, because we can all think, yep, that was awesome. Yep, that went wrong. Yep, we'd do that differently. But you've really got to think about that. And I'd really encourage you to make notes as well, because when you get to the next year or when you get to the next one, it's really easy to think about the things that you remember that went well. But quite often you've definitely learned some lessons. And so when you can go back to some quick notes to say, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, yep, that's what we decided we'd do. It can just help get that flow and help get the next one even better. Who do you need to thank? People will tell you that they don't want to be thanked. They don't need to, but people absolutely love a thank you. So really encourage you to make that difference to people, to thank them. And to celebrate the wins. We're all here for a reason. We're all here trying to do good. And I think it's important to recognise where that's gone right. So Glenn, that's what I pulled together. I hope that was helpful.
Perfect. It's perfect. You've responded to the brief. You've promoted the great work you do, and you've covered all those 3 key points that we wanted to cover in this event. So let's take it to a bit of a conversation to round off the day. I'm going to ask people to jump in here. Bruce Meyer, I've seen you sitting there and nodding and smiling the last couple of days. We haven't heard from you, though. So I'd love you to introduce yourself and say hello and where you're from and why you're here. But 2, you had a question to Lockie as well about.
Yeah, thanks. This has been great, absolutely. And I happened across Greg Smith. Don't know whether you know the guy, but I did a session with him last week as a part of Mr. Perfect, the community organisation that I host a barbecue here in Sydney each month. Unfortunately, we don't get a very big turnout, so I'm all ears to work out how I can kind of get in and get the community buzzing a bit. With Lachlan's presentation, I was really quite keen to understand how he came to be using Facebook over any of the other socials and why he thought that was the better channel. Is it about the demographic? Because we know that Facebook isn't for young people anymore. It's all of us oldies that have taken over Facebook, and the young ones moved over to Instagram. But we've got those 2 vehicles. So that was really where I was interested, because I'm just looking. We as Mr. Perfect have a Facebook presence. And it's not an actively pursued thing. It's not like Are You OK, which is out there and getting a lot of runs on the board because of the presence that they have. In fact, I get snide comments usually. Mr. Perfect, there you go. But any comment's a good comment. So that was the question. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for being here. Whereabouts in Sydney? Where's your
Bella Vista, Borkham Hills, Castle Hill is the kind of general geography. And I've taken over. We've had a couple of hosts running the barbecues at different venues. We typically meet in a park somewhere. We throw on a barbecue and some cool drinks. We are alcohol free, and we are just a bit like most a conduit to professional services, just to strike up conversations. But I've been running my barbecue now for a year, and I think I could count on both hands the number of people who have turned up as a result of just being Facebook only. And, it's hard to kind of get that traction. And that's what I'm looking for, is just to get more people turning up.
Yeah. And before you answer that question, Lockie, I just need to check in on Phil Lamport. Been a bit triggered by the us old people comment there. Phil, are you okay, friend?
I was sitting there going, well, I spend a lot of time on Facebook, but he can't possibly be referring to me in the old people comment.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Just look at my whiskers. I'm 62 this year, so I'm in that category.
Yeah.
I'm knocking on 50 this year, mate. It's all good.
Yeah, I'm surprised I've not seen you on TikTok more, Phil, but there we go. Yeah. Anyway, yes, why Facebook?
So our kind of philosophy is trying to do everything authentically, or as authentically as possible. And out of all the social media platforms, Facebook has the best tool to do that, and that's a private group. As I said, Barstool Brothers remained a private group for 3 years, and that the significance of that, it's a tactical strategy we put in place, because people can smell bullshit from a mile away, and people can sniff out if there's any hidden agendas, or if groups trying to make money or do this, that, the other. But we close our group off to ensure, one, it's a safe space, but two, that people can talk freely and you can generate those authentic kind of connections with each other online. And for a long period there, we went through COVID where we couldn't have that connection other than online. And I think that closed off group allowed our organization to develop and pick up speed because it was so authentic and genuine, and there was no other priorities besides supporting each other. And on a public Facebook page, on an Instagram, on a TikTok, you can't get that long form content, which is really authentic and engaging and connects on a one-on-one basis. So that's why we use it. Our key demographic at His Boy Elroy is men aged between 25 and 45. That no surprise lines up with our key demographic of Barstool Brothers. And they're still all using Facebook. We have started opening up different platforms as we go into a different strategy of Barstool Brothers. But for the moment, we'll definitely be focusing on the private group of Facebook.
Great, thanks, Lachlan. And it's certainly been interesting, particularly you mentioned like the time through COVID. Just one explosion of Facebook-based men's groups we've seen. Yesterday we had the Penrith Men's Walk and Talk, which only operates in Penrith in the Blue Mountains, and they get up to 300 men to their weekly walk and talks. And on Facebook they've got 10,000 followers. Now, whether that's actually a local community of 10,000 or something else, but it just shows the potential. And the other one to really mention, I think, is Blokes United, which was a group that set up purely when COVID happened, now has something like 20,000 followers, and men engage in some really authentic and raw and open conversations there on a daily basis. So yeah, certainly our experience has been, whether it works well as a marketing tool, but certainly in terms of a community building tool, it's been really interesting to see how many men's organizations have embraced that.
I think you're right, and your ability to build a community is your best marketing tool. So that's what we focus on. I'm not even thinking about how I communicate to our public. I'm just thinking about adding value to our community.
Wonderful. Right, look, we've got 10 minutes to go. I appreciate we've been doing this for over 3 hours now, but I really welcome any sort of any comments, any questions, any feedback, any reflections that anyone who's been here today has. Yeah, go John.
Thanks, mate. Hi guys, that's amazing stuff. And Catherine, Are You Okay is obviously ubiquitous and we all know it really well, but it was some great insights on the local level that you offered. But one thing I need to bridge the gap with is, Are You Okay is fairly well funded, right? And the brand is such a strong image now that it seems to attract funding now. I'm sure you would argue, but from our point of view, how do we sort of follow your tips, which were terrific, but with, say, a much lower funding profile? We can't build that kind of brand continuity.
Yeah, that's a great question, John. So maybe how could we apply some of your learning to someone who's just running a one-off event, they've got a bit of time or funding to run a one-off event, what are the key things they can take from your learning that are going to make the biggest difference?
I'd say just focus on that one thing. So I think a lot of the time when we have ideas is that we want to do this and we want to do it this many times, and then we want to do it bigger and we want to do it here, and then we want to bring in this food cart, and then we want to do this. When you've got finite resources, and absolutely agree, Are You OK has the attraction of the funding. We don't do any fundraising on the road or at our events. It's a fantastic byproduct that I think also speaks to the authenticity. So in that genuine sense, I think if you can avoid having things like right at the entrance to say, you know, gold coin donation or whatever, it's actually about focusing on that genuineness of having the conversation, having the connection, having the action. And so when you've got a small budget, remember, you've got a small team, finite resources, specific timing. So I think it's really about honing in on what's that one thing that you want to achieve and do it well, rather than trying to do 10 things on that day or in that year. And thanking your funders. So I know I said it, but sponsors and the people that give you the cash, they say they don't want to be thanked, but they do. And so it's really about, just cannot stress enough about how much time we spend on our relationships, on our stakeholders, and building that relationship. And also trying to think about, you know, trying to get them to commit to not just that one-off thing, but actually explain that that's going to be really hard to measure the success. That's going to be really hard for me to give you that value and that impact. I really need to lock in with you 3, or I really need to lock in with you another time, because I just want to be able to show you everything I can do. And with this work, with these events, I can't magic the most incredible conversation and moment and life-saving event for you, because I just don't know when that's going to happen. So I do need your time and I need your patience.
Great answer, Catherine. I'm reminded right back at the very beginning, session 1, we talked about setting goals, and the focus wasn't initially on the goals for that particular event. The starting point was, what's your bigger goal? So being clear on, you know, what's driving you, what's that big mission statement or big goal, but then recognizing that this next event, this one activity you're going to deliver isn't going to achieve that whole goal. It's going to take you one step towards that. So it's important to have that big goal, because that motivates you, that gives you the reason for doing it. But it's also important to recognize that each individual event can only take you 1 or 2 steps towards that bigger goal. And I've also been struck today as well, actually, this is not something we've really talked about much, is how many of the people we've heard from today, they've got different levels of engagement. So that really stuck out in Lachlan's talk about that sort of, we have those opportunities to engage in a really simple way, which is about a beer and a burger. But what we have, I don't know if you used the word pathway, someone did earlier, about having a pathway of engagement, where there's a really easy, simple way to sort of get involved. In fact, you'll probably get something free, or you might get a feed or something. But also beyond that, and I think we got this with the Fathering Project as well. You know, the Fathering Project was talking about, we'll have these fantastic fun events where we do planes and pizza, where they get all the dads together, there's free pizza and there's a competition to build the best paper aeroplane. But there's a pathway towards actually getting those men then into smaller groups and engaging in a more in-depth way. So yeah, if you're able to build a framework where it's more, there's a bigger thing going on than just an event, then that sort of, you know, helps motivate what you're doing. We've got a couple of minutes left. Anyone else want to jump in?
I will, Glenn. Just, that was a great presentation, Catherine. I'll do a bit of a plug here, but it seems to segue into mental health and wellbeing. That I'm involved with the Continence Foundation of Australia, and they've got a big push now for bins for blokes. So for continence products, and the problem with men dealing with that issue, that there's no bins in a men's toilet. And if I go my own experience of losing my prostate, mate, walking out with a pad at the air show in a toilet trailer with a big wet pad and going, oh, shit, what do I do with it? But that creates anxiety. And so men who are dealing with continence issues, whatever it may be, won't go out. They feel anxious. They stay at home. They start feeling isolated. So the push is to get councils and the public arenas to put bins into a men's cubicle. But the interesting thing is, I went around my local area in Sandringham here, unisex toilets, no bins. So for men or women, there are no bins at all. So the continence product bin is not even in there. And in public hospitals, and I won't mention one here in Melbourne, new hospital, no bins in the men's toilet. There's a paper bin, but the man's got to walk out with whatever sanitary product he has and put it in the bin. So there's that anxiety, mental health issues stuff going on straight away. So that's a subtle one that's operating on another level, which is, I think feeds into what, are you okay? Can you go to the air show? Can I go to the Grand Prix? Can I go to the races? Because I'm wearing pads or whatever, but how do I get rid of them when I get there? Well, I won't go out. I'll stay at home.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Thanks for your passionate advocacy as always. 2 more minutes, 1 more minute. Anyone else want to jump in before we wrap up? Right, well, I will come back to Catherine and Lachlan for a final thought then. So the question is going to be, when I jump back to you, what's one thing you want people to take away from your talk today? What's your one golden tip? It could be reinforcing something you've already said, or it could be something new that you've been keeping from us in your back pocket. But before I come back to Catherine and Lachlan, thank you all for participating today. I've had just a fantastic time. I'm super inspired. I want to turn this day into a toolkit on how to deliver men's health events. There's so much the knowledge and experience out there that's been shared and distilled today. So with our final thoughts on the one tip they want to share with you or want you to take away, I'll come back to Lachlan first.
From my perspective, I think and from a marketing perspective, I think the best tip is to look at your audience and then break it down into marketing levers and communicate on a varied platform, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's via these types of events, or whether it's involving yourself in other boards and building your own personal brand. But look at all the different levers in the marketing sphere and try and pull on all of them.
Great. So be clear who you're trying to reach, but don't just try and get them one way, get them from multiple angles. What's the old tip? People sort of need to see something 6 times before they take action. I think that's one of the old classics. So yeah.
Old people are only on Facebook.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. That's where we all hang out doing our knitting. And Catherine, final thought to you.
Let them know you don't want anything. So
Right.
make it clear you're not asking anything. And if you do that, they'll see that they should be able to see and feel the genuineness.
Yeah, I like that point you made about authenticity, this is not kind of like a fundraising initiative in disguise, which unfortunately a lot of health awareness stuff is disguising fundraising. But yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. Make sure you don't want anything. It's all about what you can give them. That's a great way to finish the day. Thanks so much. Thanks to our 2 speakers in this session. Thanks to our 8 speakers throughout the day. And thank you to the 50+ people who've been hanging out with us. We'll see you all again, I hope, tomorrow for day 4 of Men's Health Connected.
Thank you.